Congratulations. You're beginning with us, Daf Shevui, Masechet Avodah Zarah, the beginning of the 4th chapter. So you've made it already through 3 chapters of Avodah Zarah, 3/5 of it, and we're beginning a new chapter this week. So I'm very proud of all you. This chapter is somewhat of a continuation of the previous chapter. You'll see in the middle of the chapter we will change subjects completely, but we're not there yet. The chapter continues to discuss the permissibility of Jews using idols or pieces of idols that were once used in worship or seem maybe to have been used in worship. In other words, when you're walking around a pagan world, what kind of stuff of theirs can you use, and what kind of stuff is off limits? The particular subject of this first Mishnah is what's called in Hebrew the Mercury's idol. And since L's and R's, Lameds and Reshes often switch, we know that Mercury's is Mercury's or Mercurius or Mercury, the familiar god planet named after him of Mercury. Mercury, who is known in the Latin version as Hermes, is the god that protects travelers. So it seems that pagans, Romans, Greeks would often put some kind of Mercury statue in crossroads on their travels, and the idea is that Mercury or Hermes would protect them from dangers on the way. It's a little bit like the Jewish Tfilat Haderech, something you do to protect yourself on the way. In particular, our Mishnah and the Talmud that talks about it seem to refer to stacks of stones that were put there on the sides of roads, maybe pieces of a Mercury idol, but maybe like some kind of reminiscent and easy, cheap kind of extemporaneous way to build a Mercury idol. And the Mishnah talks about the status of those stones. Really, the question that the Mishnah, and there's a machloki between Rabbi Ishmael and the Chachamim and the sages, is when should we consider those stones to be part of the idol from which they may have fallen, or are those stones not part of the idol but offerings to the idol? You'll see in the Talmudic discussion that there's a difference between broken off pieces of part of an idol and stones that may have been sort of an offering to the idol, and we're going to talk about the ramifications of that as we go through the Talmud. There is a great story here about the destruction, a very interesting story about the destruction of the house of Yanai, who seems, perhaps it refers to Yanai, who was king of Israel, or may refer to some other Yanai. We're not sure who it is. But his house is destroyed, his palace is destroyed, and then they use the stones to rebuild a Mercury model idol, or a temple for Mercury. And then there comes along some people who don't worship Mercury, evidently pagans, sometimes argue and destroy each other's shrines, and this shrine is destroyed, and then the stones from the Mercury temple are used to build roads and pave roads and streets. And the question is, can Jews walk on those roads and streets? And again, you get into that kind of interesting question of how do Jews manage to live in spaces where pagans and idols and images proliferate, and items that had been used in pagan service. Included in this is a story of a rabbi who never looked at a coin because coins had images on them. Maybe he took credit cards. I don't know. So finally, after a long theoretical discussion I'm really not going to get into right now, there's sort of a side discussion that gets into our Talmud because it has a similar form to a discussion about our Mishnah. And this side discussion has nothing to do with Masechet Avodah Zarah. It has to do with working on a tree on 2 different possible occasions. One is the sabbatical year, and the other is the Chol HaMoed period, the period on on Pesach and Sukkot in between the first and the last day. These two periods have a lot of similarity in that there's certain types of work on the land that you're not supposed to do, but they're not like the festival in Yom Tov, the festival on Shabbat, where there's an absolute prohibition of doing anything, work on ground, basically on the festival, the Yom Tov, the first and the last day of Pesach and Sukkot and Shavuot and Shabbat and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. You're not allowed to do any work. But on Chol HaMoed, you're allowed to do some work. You're not allowed to do other work. That's the topic of Masechet Moed Katan. And Shvit, and there's a whole Masechet in the Mishnah, is similar. You're basically not allowed to work the land, but there are certain things you can do so that all of your, let's say, trees don't die out within that year, because that would be impossible to sustain an agricultural lifestyle, an agricultural economy, if your trees died out once every 7 years. So that's what that topic is. It tries to figure out what is the difference between Chol HaMoed and Shavuot and the sabbatical year. Again, it has nothing to do with Avodah Zarah. As always, enjoy learning the daf, and do be in touch on our Daf Shvui page on Facebook.